to launch into a new unit about ancient China. So it looks like you've started to go through some different nonfiction texts, and you were kind of getting a general overview about ancient China. Is that right? Yeah? So one thing that I talked about with Mrs. Smith was the different things that you guys went over yesterday. Ms. Smith gathered the sources for you, and you guys were working on previewing them. And you were looking for books that helped you find an overview. And in doing that, eventually we're going to get to a point where we're going to come up with a list of subtopics. But for today, what I'd like to do is really think about this word preview. And instead of jumping into coming up with subtopics, and instead of jumping into taking notes, I want us to take a step back, okay? One thing I noticed when I was looking through different books is that there were different kind of levels of text. Did you guys notice this as well?
Yep.
Yep. And let's see, who can raise their hand? What kind of text should you maybe be looking at first? The easier ones. We're going to look through those, kind of get a general idea, and from there, where would we want to move? Who can tell me? Yeah? Yeah, to a more medium level, and then once we go to the medium level, we can move on from there. So, I was looking just kind of for, like we talked about, a general overview about ancient China. So I found, I had the same, I think, basket of books as you guys. So I started looking through a few of these, and I'm going to show you which ones I looked through, and I'm going to explain to you which one I chose and why. So I first looked at this one. I thought the cover looked like it was good. It talked about ancient China, not modern China. And when I came to this page, there was tons of writing on it, and I started reading it, and it didn't seem like maybe the most basic text like we talked about wanting to start with. So this could have some really good information, but I didn't think I really wanted to start there. So I put that one away. And then I came up with a couple other ones here. And when I started reading through these ones, they seemed to have more of a direction. This one seemed to be more about archaeology. This one seemed to be more about the geography of things and just about numbers. So I thought those weren't really a good idea to start with for my general overview. So what I found in this book was the text seemed like a good level to start with, and it had a good amount of information in it. Do you guys all have this book? No.
There's
okay.
only one. I think that's the only one.
It is the only one? Oh wow. Okay. Well, do you have like class helpers, or with the DocuCam should I set that up?
No, you can have your techie help you.
Can my techie help me out?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, we're gonna look at this together. Oh, let's move, before you pull that down, let's move this over so we can have this available while we're reading our text.
So who else is a techie with Rachel?
You can turn that somewhere.
Okay. So, first thing I did was I narrowed down to a book that I felt was a good place to start. Have you guys already read nonfiction texts this year?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've done this in what subject?
Science.
In science. So this isn't your first rodeo. You want to try it one more time? This isn't your first rodeo here, huh? You guys have already looked at nonfiction texts and thought about thoughtful ways to read nonfiction text. So that's what I want our focus to be on today when we're looking at our books. I want us to think about how we can best read our nonfiction text in order to help us eventually take notes and then write our own nonfiction text. Do you guys remember some things that you thought about when you were reading nonfiction text? What were some different things that you wanted to identify when you were reading nonfiction text? Who remembers any of them? I'm noticing one already on this page that was helping me identify what kind of text this would be. All right, and what is the timeline? What's that going to tell you kind of about the text?
Like, maybe this happened.
Yeah, it's going to tell you, it's going to organize the information in what kind of an order? Do you remember that word? It's a tough word.
Chronological.
Chronological order. So that's one way that we could be reading a text. So I noticed that already without even reading anything in this book. What were some other ways that you guys read nonfiction texts? What were other structures that you looked at?
The effect and the cause.
Cause and effect. That's another way that they might organize the reading that you're doing. What about you?
Problem and solution.
Problem and solution would be another one. Did you have anything? Same one. Okay. Do you have another one? Compare and contrast would be another one.
The
Venn diagram. Yeah, they might use something like that to compare and to contrast. So a lot of history can be written in a chronological order, but what I want you guys to be thinking about are all of those different ones that we were just talking about as we read a little bit of this book, okay? Once I'm done with reading this, we're going to talk a little bit about what you noticed in this text, okay? So I'm going to put it under the DocuCam here and we'll read together. There's a few really long words, and I wrote definitions for those. If we notice that there's any other words that come up, we can add on to those, okay? So before I read this, let's talk about these so we know what's happening as I'm reading. You guys heard the word culture before?
Yes.
Yeah, who could give me a good brief description of culture? You can read this one right up here too if you'd like. Go ahead.
The beliefs or customs of a group of people.
Okay, so that probably is going to have something to do with what we're reading. What about this word? Civilization. All right, what's a civilization? Go ahead.
A culture that existed during a particular time/period.
Okay, so these kind of have something to do with each other, yeah? What about this last one? Who would like to read that? Let me see somebody who I haven't heard from yet. Go ahead.
A family of rulers who ruled over a place or country.
Right, and that's called a dynasty. So these are all going to be things, start thinking, that we're going to be reading about. Okay, let's see which way am I going here. Okay, so as I read through this first page, it says Chinese history. The culture of China is at least 4,000 years old, making it the oldest continuous civilization that we know about. Much of Chinese history can be divided into time periods based on dynasties or royal families. Is that still tough to read?
It's getting
Can you
better.
guys see? Thumbs up if you can see. Okay. It says each dynasty brought its own changes to the country. During the Qin dynasty, China was united by Qin Shi Huang, who was known as the first emperor of China. Construction began on the famous Great Wall, designed to protect the northern border of the kingdom, while thousands of clay warriors, called terracotta army, were made to guard the emperor's tomb. Let's read a little longer here. Tell me when I'm good. You guys see? Thumbs up? All right. During the Han Dynasty, the Silk Road became an important route for trading goods and ideas between countries of the East and West. Paper was invented in the Han Dynasty, and the development of printing during the Song Dynasty led to the world's first printed books. Okay, and then they go on to name one last dynasty here. We'll stop after that one. During the Ming Dynasty, Beijing became the capital of China. A palace complex called the Forbidden City was built for the emperor's family. Ordinary people were not allowed to enter. In 1911, the Qing Dynasty was defeated in a revolution, ending the tradition of Chinese emperors. Now, if I went on, I'd see that we're not really in ancient China anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and just stop there. Are there any things that really stood out to you guys in this text in terms of text structure? Was there anything that you guys noticed? Hannah, what did you notice?
I didn't know that the Chinese culturally been only like been 4,000 years.
Okay. What does that 4,000 years tell you? How could you relate that to a text structure of nonfiction? Thinking about cause and effect, or compare and contrast, or chronology. What kind of a text structure is that kind of lending itself to?
Chronological?
Yeah, it's giving us kind of a time frame. And then, like we noticed earlier at the bottom of the page here, there's a timeline. Did you guys notice any other ways that the information was grouped together, other than in like a timeline format? Are there any other ways that you could group things together? Do you need to see the text back up on the screen? Or do you want me to give you a hint? I was noticing that they kind of broke things up in categories. Does anybody notice any of the categories? What did you notice?
Chinese history.
Well, yeah, we're in Chinese history, the overview.
There's like the Qing dynasty, the Song dynasty, the Han dynasty, the Ming dynasty.
So those are in chronological order, but we could also group them just by dynasty, by category, and look at some ways that we could take notes about each of those dynasties. Were there any other ways that you guys would group the information that you read? Any other text structures you could relate them to? Yeah, they are in paragraphs, and the paragraphs are kind of breaking up those different dynasties, right? Do you think that this gave you a good overview of ancient China? Would it help you to maybe start thinking about a list of subtopics?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So here's what I want our goal today to be. You guys were in pairs yesterday reading? Or were you in groups? Groups. Okay. So in your group, I want you guys to go through some different texts. And I want you guys, before you do this, I'll let you know when to go, okay? Before you start, listen to all the directions. I want you guys to be looking through different texts, and I want you to not worry at all about taking notes. I just want you talking with your group. And I want you guys to find those different text structures that we talked about. And I can write them up on the board. And I want you to be able to explain why you think what you read was organized in that way, okay? So you're going to get some time to go through a bunch of different books and decide what kind of text features you can identify and why they are that type of text, okay? And then at the end, I'm going to have you guys compare with some other groups and convince them why you're right in the text structures that you found, okay? If you understand what you're doing, if your group understands what we're working on, put your thumb up. Your whole group. Are you for a group here? Okay, your group can go find a place that you're able to talk with each other. What other group is ready to go? Are you guys a group of 5? Are you feeling all like you know what to do? Okay, go ahead and find an area to go. You guys feel like you know what you're doing? Okay, and you guys are good to go? All right, so start breaking up into your groups and talking about text structures that you're seeing. Okay, so for you guys to be able to talk to each other, you all be facing the wall. How can we organize ourselves to be able to have a conversation? What's in terms of how they've organized the book, though? What are you noticing? How have they broken up the chapters? How could you find in this book the way that they've organized the chapters? Is there a page that lists those? Let's get the beginning of the book. Okay, what are those chapters? Let's see how they've chosen to organize it.
Guys, if you have questions, raise your hand. I can come around also.
There's no, what's that called? What is that page that lays out all the chapters called? Do you remember? The table. Yeah. There's no table of contents here. You just start right in. Huh. Okay, we can see that too. It looks like they've kind of come up with categories here. So take maybe one chapter, I want you to look at one chapter, one category, and then see how they break that chapter up, okay? Tell me if it's useful, or if it's a way that you would organize your, the different text structures, cause and effect, compare, contrast, timelines in chronological order, things like that. And I want your group to come up with what you think the best way to organize your thoughts are about these ancient history books, okay? And then you're going to share out with another group. What did you notice about your chapter? So are they sharing that over a period of time, or are they just talking about that picture? Or during a certain time? Okay, so this one is all about money. I want you to look at another and see what you're noticing, okay? Ways are that they've organized these books about history and why you think that, okay? So if you have some examples from the books that you've been reading, I want you to share those with them. Using those in taking notes for tomorrow, okay? So you have about 5 minutes starting now, so 59 now we'll stop, okay? Anybody have any text features that they noticed that they wanted to share out with the group that they thought were really helpful? Do they, and if you do, I would love it if you had the book where you could show us. I see that you have a book open. Do you want to share what you've got?
Yours was good.
I heard it was good.
I'm sure it's good, but I only heard that.
Mine was cause and effect.
Okay. Cause and effect, and it was in the Emperor's Silent Army. Can you explain to us what the cause and effect was that you found?
The cause is the farmers, they found like a head inside the well, inside like the place they were digging.
Okay.
It's not like a real one, it's like clay made.
Okay.
It's already burned. They thought it was like, they thought it was like just normal clay found, like underground,
Mm-hmm.
but it was already burned. Yeah. So they dug around it and found a clay human being made of terracotta.
Okay.
And they were like, if there's one, there could be more. They found like 7,000 around it.
That was
So-
where
and
they
that's
found the
effect.
terracotta warriors.
So the cause is that the farmers strikes a head,
Mm-hmm.
and the effect is that they found 7,000 soldiers.
Okay, so that the way that they structured that text made it really helpful to understand exactly how they discovered the terracotta warriors. Does anybody else have an example that they'd like to share that was really helpful to them? I'm gonna go with blue shirt. Can you tell me your name again?
Matthew.
Matthew, go ahead and share with the group. You were in what book?
I like Rachel took a book I was going to have the example from, but this is also a book that could be.
Okay, we can share if we need to, but if you have one in there, that works too.
So like because according to this book, like it's organized first by subject,
Mhm.
like about like for example pottery and then maybe funerals and that stuff, and then within the chapter it just talks about like, early pottery, late pottery, and organized
So-
time.
Can I summarize what you just said? He's saying that every chapter or every subject was then organized in a chronological order. So that would be two different text features. They'd have different categories that are organized within chronologically. That seems like it would be a really nice way to read about history. I think that that's a really good one to keep in your head. Anybody else have any that they want to share? Tanner, go ahead.
So I have one that is it's also a cause and effect one, but this one is when some archaeologists who found bones that were like cut by knives, and they thought it couldn't be by animals because animals don't know how to use utensils. So then they kept searching, and then they realized that maybe way back then that there were like these cannibals, like people who eat people,
Mm-hmm.
going like crazy after like going everywhere and eating people.
Interesting. Good cause and effect. Does anybody have an example that's not chronological and not cause and effect? Or were those the two main examples that you guys were noticing?
I had problem and solution.
Problem and solution. Okay, I'm going to have that be the last one that we share for the day. Let's hear it.
The problem is that they can't travel they can't share knowledge superficially. So the solution is they invented printing.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. So what I want you guys to gather from today's lesson is that when you're reading through the information and you're researching, if you can identify the text structure that you're reading about, you can use that to help you take notes that are really well organized. And then you can use those notes to organize your own writing in a way that you think is beneficial and that is going to be helpful for people who are reading. Okay? So tomorrow we'll look at these books again and we'll start thinking about how we can organize notes after we figure out some subtopics that we're going to be looking at. Okay?